It's time!
What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to The Locker Room. On today's episode, we're diving into the world of college football, the ever-changing world of college football, that is. And before we can even do that, you know how this works. Make sure you're following TLR Podcast 615. That is TLR Podcast 615 on social media, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, so you can watch exclusive content, you can stay up to date with everything I've got going on, and you can interact with me, and I will interact back. It's a lot of fun. There's constant polls, surveys, quizzes, things going on all the time. So don't miss out, TLR Podcast 615. If you like the show, share it with a friend, subscribe, comment, everything you can to help promote the show would mean the world to me. TLR Podcast 615.
Nice view from our Cheez-It Real Fan Cam. These folks are sturdy and strong to be out here in this heat for 4 hours, and we definitely...
The beautiful sounds of college football are coming to a television screen near you in just a few short months. But that is not without a bunch of drama along the way. Right now, we are in the biggest realignment in college football history. And it might not be the biggest realignment by the number of teams realigning, or by the regions and the states that they're realigning to, meaning like states conferences. It's the biggest realignment with dollar signs and name brands attached to it. The Texases, the Oklahomas, the USCs, UCLAs. Please, Lord, Oregon. Well, there's not going to be a Pac-12 in another 5 months, so I guess they'll have to realign somewhere. All these big name schools are trying to join each other and make mega conferences and super conferences. We're trying to eliminate conferences. The drama is not going unnoticed. And in fact, there's a lot of fans that absolutely hate this. There's a lot of fans that absolutely love this. I'm here to bring balance. I'm here to bring balance to the force. I'm here to bring order to the court. It's a little bit of in between. See, this all started when the two most biggest... I don't want to say that. That's harsh. And I know people that are fans of these schools. The biggest jackass schools, minus a few, they're definitely in the top 5 of jackass schools, in Oklahoma and Texas, decided to pack their stuff and go to the SEC. You see, Oklahoma couldn't beat any SEC teams, so they said, might as well go play them every year. Might as well join the conference. If we're going to lose to Georgia every year in the playoffs because somehow we sneak into that last spot, we sneak into that 4th slot, and we have to play Alabama and we get beat by 45 every year, you might as well just go play them in September. Go play them in October and lose then. So that's what Oklahoma did. They lost their coach, they lost their quarterback, and they are out of the Big 12 and in to the SEC. And Texas was great. Texas is like, Texas is that guy that wears his class championship, his football championship ring from high school everywhere he goes, and just relives the glory days. Like, Texas has some success, and then they're like, remember that one time in 2006? We were amazing! They're that guy. The person who just won't get out of the past. Oh, remember in high school? I had 28 touchdowns. They're that. Except there's a yeehaw instead of So Texas decides, hey, we're going with Oklahoma. We're going to go play with the big dogs. But what I will say is Oklahoma is a big name brand school. Texas is a massive name brand school. So the money makes sense. The eyes on the networks is going to make sense. Who doesn't want to watch a Texas versus Alabama matchup every year? Who doesn't want to watch an Oklahoma versus Tennessee every year? Everybody will. So it makes sense. I was not mad at them. They're just the LeBron James moving to Miami to the now Kevin Durant to Golden State that's going on. They started making themselves mobile. They went to the SEC. The SEC now is the greatest conference in the entire world. Before I move on, can I mention something real quick, though? Because I got into an argument with my best friend the other day. And he is an SEC fan. He's a conference fan. He loves Tennessee, but at the end of the day, he will root for Alabama, he'll root for Georgia, Texas A&M, Arkansas, Auburn, Kentucky, you name it. Teams that are his biggest team's rival, he is their biggest diehard fan if his team sucks. So when Tennessee sucks every year, now all of a sudden he loves Alabama. And now, either way, his team's being successful. That is the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life. I'm not going to get into it. I'm passionate about this, all right? I can't stand people that are like, I'm a conference fan. If you're a Tennessee fan, how in the living hell could you be a Vanderbilt fan? You can't. It's insanity. You're what's wrong with America. You're probably the reason that gas prices are too high right now. It's you. Your fault. Just saying. But can we agree on just this one thing real quick? Besides like the top 5 teams in the SEC, the rest of the SEC is not that great. The best teams in the Big 10, the best teams in the Big 12, and the best teams in the Pac-12 would win 95% of the games against the worst teams in the SEC. But for some reason, just because it has SEC slapped in front of it, everybody thinks that Vanderbilt can go beat Utah. That Missouri can rival Ohio State. And this is my problem with conference fans. You're delusional. Like, let's just agree. Georgia, Alabama, Auburn, Texas A&M, and probably LSU, those schools every year are going to beat 85% of college football. They just are. They're going to get the 5-star recruits. They're going to be great. You know, they're going to win a bunch of games. They're going to be hard to beat at least. Like your Alabamas are basically invincible. Georgia has been basically invincible over the last few years. Texas A&M's getting back to its stardom. Auburn's always a tough school to play. Ask Oregon. We almost beat them on a last-minute touchdown. You know, LSU went from being one of the most respectable teams in the entire country to the worst team last year and literally was getting beat by basically no-name schools. For anybody that says I should put Tennessee in this conversation, no. You lost to a high school team last year to open up your season. I don't even remember what it was, like Georgia Southern? The people who beat you didn't know who they were. By the way, my brother-in-law went to that game in full Oregon Ducks gear. Go Ducks. And he said it was probably the funniest thing that he's ever been to, watching 100,000 Tennessee fans on opening day cry and whine as they lost to another high school team with the hopes of making it to the SEC championship again, because that's delusional Tennessee fans for you. But I just wanted to point that out there. Besides like the top 5 schools in the SEC is not the greatest conference from top to bottom. They're not. There's not many conferences that are great from top to bottom or competitive from top to bottom. And the SEC is no exception to that. They just house the best teams in college football. Collectively teams. You know, you've got your Ohio States, your Penn States, your Wisconsins. You've got your Oregons, your Utahs, your USCs when they're not being stupid, your UCLAs. You've got your Clemsons, your Notre Dames, you know, and so on. Like, you've got your top teams. But as far as the SEC being the most untouchable conference from top to bottom, that's complete bullshit, and I just wanted to get that out there because I just had a heated discussion with a friend about this, and it's a proven statistical fact, man. Vanderbilt is not going in and beating Clemson in Death Valley. Let's be rational thinkers. Now, the SEC is the greatest conference in all of college football. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that they're not the greatest conference. They are. And with the addition of Oklahoma and Texas now packing up their stuff and moving to the SEC, they are the greatest conference in college football. They have the most high-dollar teams. They have the most recognizable names. Besides a few schools outside of there, like an Ohio State, a Clemson, a Notre Dame, there's not many other schools that would command the TV presence, the eye presence, the attention, the dollar signs that an Oklahoma and a Texas would. It's just facts. So I was okay with this move from Oklahoma and Texas. Listen, Oklahoma and Texas are going to find out real quick that it's going to be a tough conference to play in when you're having to play Alabama and Georgia and Auburn and Texas A&M every year, depending on where you line up. So instead of Oklahoma getting to play Alabama every year in the playoffs and inevitably lose by 45, now they have to see Alabama week 3 of the season. That's interesting to me. I would like to see an Oklahoma have to rival an Alabama every week. I would like to see these other SEC schools get tested. You see, the SEC always is beating the SEC. Because outside of the SEC, they don't play anybody. Go bring up Alabama's schedule for the last 5 years, and they have 4 high school teams and a team for the deaf and the blind and every single year, like week 3. You know, Alabama, they're like, oh, we're playing Duke. Duke's a recognizable school. Are you playing them in basketball? Then no, it's not respectable, Alabama. We the greatest conference. We the greatest people. We Alabama. We Bama, man. We beat Duke. We beat Duke by like 65. Congratulations. You know who else beats Duke? Everybody that plays Duke. But I was okay with the landscape shifting a little bit. I want to see these matchups. And I think realignment is good in a lot of areas. I want to see new and exciting and refreshing matchups. I want to see who doesn't want to tune into a Texas-Georgia game every year. Who doesn't want to watch a Texas A&M Texas game every year? That's fun. I'm not saying that Texas and Oklahoma are absolutely going to just fit in and be a top 6-7 school in the conference. I think they're going to find out that it's very difficult to play in the SEC because you play the top 5 schools in the SEC are the best teams in the country almost every single year. But it's fun for the viewers. It's fun for the fans. It's going to create great matchups. And also recruiting-wise, being in the SEC is very good for Oklahoma and Texas. And college football is good when top-name schools are good. When Oklahoma, Texas, Wisconsin, Penn State, Ohio State, your Oregons, your Utahs, USCs, UCLAs, Notre Dames, Clemson's, Florida States, when all of these big-name schools are good, it makes college football good. It makes college football very competitive. I love the fact when you have 7 or 10 undefeated teams heading into week 8 and we're trying to figure out our top 10. That's awesome. That's what makes college football so fun. So the more competitive these other markets can be, the more competitive these other teams can be, the better. No one wants to see, if we're being honest, at the end of the day, even an Alabama fan could agree with this, and they can't agree with much. An Alabama fan can agree that we would much rather see a 34-28 victory over Oklahoma. I'm not an Alabama fan. I don't know why I said we. No, I don't find my cousin attractive. No, I don't find my cousin attractive. I just felt like I had to get all that out there. I wonder if when you become an Alabama fan, if the bandwagon shows up, or it's like a waiting process. You know what I mean? I was just curious. But I would much rather see a competitive 34-28 victory in Alabama's favor over in Oklahoma than a 48-0 victory over Oklahoma. People want to see competitive games. And Oklahoma and Texas moving into the SEC will create that. That is going to be great for recruiting for Oklahoma and Texas. If Texas can now say, yo, we're going to be playing big dogs every week, Texas has the money, it has the students, it has the boosters to be a very successful SEC team. Mark my words, SEC fans, Texas is going to be the biggest regret that you make in your conference. It's going to be great for the SEC, great for the conference power line. Because Texas in 3-4 years is going to be a powerhouse in the SEC. So I'm okay with all that. I'm okay with what all that brings. Realignment's great for college football. It gives us great things like this. It gives us great matchups. And then we get greedy. Then the conferences start drinking the Kool-Aid. Then, instead of LeBron James, after playing out his contract, going to Miami, you got your Kevin Durant's with 4 years left on a deal that are packing up their crap and just leaving. So it was reported that USC and UCLA, these staples of the Pac-12, are going to pack their things up and head to the Big Ten. Now, while, I don't care about the Pac-12. I could give a damn as long as Oregon's successful. But for the Pac-12, this is no good news because the USC-UCLA demographic is going to bring in 34 to 45% of your viewership every year. Just a fact. USC, no matter how bad they are, it's like Tennessee fans. USC and Tennessee fans are the exact same. Everybody says, well, we're loyal. Oh, shut up. You know how many seasons of Oregon football I've sat through where we go 4-11? Okay? I want to hear your loyalness. But the the USC and UCLA numbers are now going to desecrate the Pac-12. It will no longer exist. I don't care what anybody says. The Pac-12 is in panic mode right now. Well, we're going to add teams like North Dakota. We're going to add teams like blah. No. It doesn't matter. You see, because it's not about just adding teams. Now that UCLA and USC are dipping, so is all your other top schools. The Big 12 is trying to absorb Arizona, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, Utah. So the rest of the Pac-12 powerhouses are gone. So even though Texas and Oklahoma dipped out on the Big 12 and everybody's like, oh, they're done for, they're now reloading with the most popular schools in the Pac-12. USC and UCLA, they're gone. Big Ten, bye-bye. And this is where conference realignment really bothers me. I don't believe that you should be able to realign this many teams at a time. Because you're now going to lose. Now, I don't care about the Pac-12, but you're now going to lose the Pac-12. I just don't understand. How can we realign the entire college football landscape and not create balance anywhere? The SEC is now the new mega conference. The Big 12, honestly, is going to be right there as a mega conference. The Big 12 adding Oregon, Utah, Colorado, Arizona State, adding all of those schools, those are decent schools that get a lot of numbers. So the Big 12 is going to be a mega conference. The SEC is going to be a mega conference. The ACC is relatively untouched right now, but chances are that's not going to last. And then you have the Big 10. How can we realign the entire college football landscape and literally desecrate an entire conference? How are these schools? I just don't understand how this is okay. If Oregon relocates to the Big 12, Oregon will now have to fly every single away game, multiple hours. If Oregon has to play Texas Tech, it's now a 5-hour, 6-hour flight, not an hour flight. What happens with all these Big 12 schools like UCLA now joining the Big 10? They're going to have a 9-hour, 10-hour flight every week. How does any of that make sense? How is the furthest west school moving all the way to the furthest east conference in a lot of places? Northeast, I guess. It doesn't make, there's no balance in any of this. And while I'm a fan of teams realigning and moving things around so we can get better matchups, we can get more exciting games, this is what I loved that Oregon has been doing, and I know I'm talking about Oregon a lot. I'm sorry. Go Ducks. But what I love that Oregon's been doing is we've started to schedule more out-of-conference games, as many as we can, with bigger name schools. We've played Auburn. We've played Tennessee. Destroyed them 54-0. We're going to play Georgia. We beat Ohio State last year. So Oregon understood, and the schools understood, hey, we know of a way that we can get more viewership on our kids. We can get bigger television spots. We can help that in our recruiting. We can get more kids here when we say, hey, you're going to play a Georgia, an Ohio State, a Texas A&M, whatever. You're going to play these schools every year. You're going to play a Florida State every year. So Oregon started to rearrange their schedule in order to make kids and make it more beneficial to the program, because now when we beat an Ohio State, we're going to be top 4, top 5 in the country if we're undefeated, because we're playing bigger name schools that are, chances are, ranked in the top 10. But we're not leaving the conference and taking everything with us in order to get stuff like that done. What my point is, I'm okay with realigning in certain types of, in the conferences. I'm okay with 1 or 2 schools moving here, 1 school moving here, 1 school moving over here. I'm okay with Notre Dame joining the Big Ten. They should have. All eyes are on Notre Dame right now. That's one of the biggest sports markets in the entire country that's just a free agent right now. I'm okay with Notre Dame. Hell, Notre Dame, go to the SEC. Who doesn't want to see Notre Dame play SEC schools every week? I'm okay with a Notre Dame. I'm okay with a Wisconsin. I'm okay with 1 or 2 schools realigning. The problem that I have right now is we're having 5 and 6 and 7 schools realign, and we're losing entire conferences at this point. And I'm not necessarily mad that we're losing the Pac-12 or that we're losing a conference. What's frustrating is we're losing probably the Pac-12. I just don't see how it survives and thrives with North Dakota, ECU, or insert some terrible school here. Unless Notre Dame were to go save the Pac-12, they're not going to do that. Well, it's Notre Dame, you never know. But unless some other big-name schools go out to the Pac-12 and join that conference is probably going to disappear. Done. But you can't make mega conferences now, have all of these teams now join the Big 12 and join the Big 10 and join the SEC and not expand the playoffs. There are going to be teams that deserve to be in the playoffs. There are going to be matchups we deserve to watch. There's going to be a 1-loss team, a 2-loss team, a 2-loss Texas A&M team, a 2-loss Oregon or Utah, that unless they win their division, unless they come out conference champions, are not going to be in the college football playoff. Or you're going to have 4 of the same schools in the playoffs, basically. We're going to have the same problem that we've always had, which is 2 SEC schools almost making the playoffs every year, but we know what that's going to look like, so let's throw in Oklahoma in there, and we know they're going to get destroyed. So you can't make all these mega conferences, bring all these big names into a conference, and now we're going to have this big super conference. The SEC is a super conference. The Big 12 is going to make themselves a super conference and not expand the playoffs. Because less conferences means less conference champions. Means less discussions on who deserves to be in the playoffs. Because an undefeated Oregon team coming out of the Pac-12 now has an interesting discussion. Well, who did they beat this year? Do they deserve to be up here? Do they need to be in the playoffs? Because if there's a 1-loss Oklahoma conference champion, and that 1 loss maybe was to a Georgia, just throwing out a name, an undefeated Georgia who, won the SEC, well, now we have an interesting discussion, don't we? Now we have to weigh the options. Does Oregon's schedule make them better suitors for the college football playoff, or do we put Oklahoma in there with 1 loss? But they are a conference champion, and maybe they played the team that is undefeated all year. We're not going to have a lot of those discussions the more conferences we get rid of. So I don't think it's necessarily great for college football that we're on the precipice of losing the Pac-12. There's talks that the ACC, although it's untouched right now, that the ACC is looking to maybe dismantle some things. So where do we go from here? And this is where the next few months are very critical. Because there is a way that everything kind of smooths out. Everybody's happy. The conferences are restored back to balance. And, it probably won't be as much of a drop-off as we think. And this is why, I'm just, I'm kind of just venting and talking about this in general. But the only way that everything works out is if we don't lose the Pac-12, but instead we move some teams up like UCF, Houston, Cincinnati, BYU. Those are schools that have big enough markets that could go to the Pac-12 now that the Pac-12 is basically losing everybody, and balance will be restored. So I guess the only thing I've really been ranting about, and the only thing that I'm just kind of being very protective of, is the game of college football itself. Now, the NCAA has seemed to do a pretty good job of keeping the balance. But with the talks of dissolving the entire Pac-12, if the Pac-12 can't reach a lucrative new television deal, like, those are the small things that if we lose that entire conference, the entire football landscape could turn into chaos. And I don't want there to be a realignment every 5 years where everybody just joins up and tries to make a mega conference. You don't need all the best teams in the same conference. You don't. Honestly, it would do good to see some of these SEC teams, maybe venture out into the ACC, the Big 10, the Big 12, the Pac-12. Vanderbilt's for sure one of those teams. Listen guys, Vandy, you don't need to be playing in the SEC. Because at this point, where you geographically land on the map apparently does not matter in what conference you play. So, why doesn't Vanderbilt join the ACC? Or go to the Pac-12? Vanderbilt would be a decent Pac-12 team. I just want to keep college football balanced. I don't want us to ruin it over the dollars. And that was my worry with all these players starting to get paid now. Not that I don't think that a lot of these kids are going to deserve it, and there is a lot of money made off of their name, their game, their school. Like, I get that 100%. If you're a top guy in the country, you deserve to be making money for the amount of money that you're bringing in. I am all for that 100%. But if money gets involved in where these teams line up, what conferences stay alive, what conferences disappear, then the game of college football at its purest form is going to be ruined. Because it's going to be dollar signs and TV spots. It's not going to be kids playing for schools or going to schools because of that they love the program, they love the coach. These kids are going to start making decisions. Well, if Oklahoma's in the SEC, I've always wanted to play for the SEC. Now you got a bunch of kids going to Oklahoma. So what happens to all these other SEC schools? Well, you're going to have 4 or 5 really good teams, and the rest of the conference is going to be so bad it's going to be laughable. See, right now, we're kind of at a power balance where it's like the Pac-12, there's not really, besides Utah, there was not really one amazing standout. Oregon had some success. UCLA had some success. Colorado had some success. Arizona State had some success. Everything's balanced right now. And even though some of these teams are moving conferences, the balance will inevitably settle down and be restored again. Let's just be careful with how we're treating the game of college football. Let's not worry so much about the dollar sign that comes along with that team. And let's worry a little bit more about where that team fits best. Let's be smart about what teams we let into certain conferences. Because at the end of the day, if only one conference is successful and only one conference has all of the best teams in the entire country, and we allow all of these top schools all join to the SEC or join to the ACC or whatever, if we let all of these top 5 schools in the country or top teams in the country join one mega conference, college football is going to be ruined. It is. Because there's only going to be one conference that has champions in it. There's only going to be one conference that people are going to watch for winning football. And there's going to be a bunch of crappy football out there. And no one wants to see that. I don't want to see recruiting destroyed. I don't want to see the Pac-12, the Big 10, the Big 12. I don't want to see the ACC. I don't want to see any of those schools destroyed because we're allowing mega conferences to form. Restore it to balance. That's all I'm asking for. Those are just some of my thoughts on the college football landscape. I'd love to hear from you. TLR Podcast 615. What are your thoughts on the college football realignment? Is this a bad thing? Is this a good thing? Or are you kind of in between like me? where there is some good that's going to come out of this. There's going to be some great matchups that we get. There's going to be teams that deserve to be in the SEC, deserve to be in the Big 12, Big 10, whatever. There's some schools that we're going to have some really great football matchups. But do we allow the conference realignment to destroy other conferences and make one super conference? Because I think that's just bad for college football. And we want to protect the game that we all love. We want to protect the most purest sporting event ever in the history of the world to watch, which is college football. But let me know your thoughts. TLR Podcast 615. I think there's a lot of good that comes with this. I think there's a lot of bad that can come with this if we're not careful. So let's make sure that college football keeps its balance. We keep them in check. Once again, everybody, I'm Jacob Courtwright, and this is The Locker Room.